So welcome to the actually the 6th week in this course. So we'll be talking again about real options, but now about sequential investments in this week. So what we'll do today is first introduce what we mean by sequential investments, and then we'll go in particular today through the paper by G.T.J that's on your reading list. So I'll discuss that basically in two parts. So it's about investment in a particular kind of power plant, a combined heat and power plant, CHP plant, which combines power production with heat production. So I'll have a look at this investment project that is analyzed in this paper by G.T.J and Maribou. First at the option to expand power generation capacity, and then we look at the option to also install a heat exchanger in this particular plant to also produce heat apart from power. So that will be the major part basically of today's lecture, and then finally I'll say just a few words actually about continuous investments, because that will be basically the topic of the next lecture. So I'll have a look at that next time mostly. So sequential investments, what are those? What do we mean by those? Well, what we considered so far, so in particular in this paper by Murtagh and Azer, was a single investment. So there's a decision to make an investment in a power plant, and of course in Murtagh and Azer had the decision to a choice actually to make, do we want to invest in a power plant which is gas fired, or do we want to make this investment in this power plant which was biomass fired, but still is just ultimately one investment that's actually going to take place in the end. And now what we're going to consider today is that if you make one investment, and sometimes, or actually often perhaps, you will also have the opportunity to extend this investment. So there will be some follow-up decisions to be made. So let's some examples here. So suppose you're investing in a network, a gas network, so pipelines for gas. Well, what you will typically do if you're this operator of this network, you'll first put in place a relatively small network, and then as demand grows or as cities expand, you will expand this network to grow it, to keep up with actually increasing demand. What also often happens is that you will first make an investment in a pilot project. So you would like to see what's the cost, or how do operations go, is this actually going to be a profitable plant, is there actually any demand for this product that I'm producing here. So by making this pilot project investment, you will get a small plant essentially, but you will have the option to, if you see that this production in your pilot phase is actually successful, you have the option to invest, to expand, to scale up this production facility. And same actually takes place if you build a power plant. So you might build a small power plant first, but then as demand for power is growing, you might want to expand capacity later on. And perhaps you actually have to make a choice. Do I indeed want to make a small investment now and then follow up with this with some additional small investment, or do I want to do everything in one go, or perhaps have some economies of scale in terms of investment, but you will be exposed to the additional risk that actually demand might not be as advantageous as for you as you had expected upfront. So there's a choice to be made here. And the idea is that we want to value these choices. So choices typically are valuable, because they are valuable, they're also going to have to be taken into account in making the investment decision in the first place. So what we want to do again is we want to value such future choices, and we want to value them again as options, or as real options actually. So how would we do this? Well, actually we can make the comparison here with compound options, which is a type of option that you might know from your financial options courses. So a compound option basically is an option to buy an option. So when you exercise your first option, what you get is not, say, a stock in financial terms, but you get another option perhaps on a stock, or some interest rate or whatever. So it's an option to buy an option. That's a compound option. And that's basically what we have when we are looking at these investments that we can follow up with new investments. So when you invest in the first stage, you get your first stage, obviously, with cash flows associated to those, but you also get something else, namely you get a new option to go with it, and this new option is the option to invest in the follow-up stage, in the second stage of these investments, and also that second investment option is going to have some value and is going to impact on, when do you want to make your first investment. So that's basically what we'll want to go and have a look at. So what will we do this week? We'll have a look at the sequential options. So the first one is the paper that we're going to do today, which is this paper by Siddiqui and Marabou. So this is about investment in some industrial CHP, combined heat and power plant. So you can have a look at the paper, of course, but we'll also go into the analysis in some detail. So the idea here is, what's the compound option or what's the sequential option that's involved here? Well, there's actually two. So one is extending capacity to cover also electric peak load. So the idea being, you first invest in a small power plant which can meet the base load demand for your factory, for instance. So suppose you're a steel factory or a paper mill. So you have some electricity demand, and you can cover that, your base load demand, by some small plant, and then you might actually, when your fuel costs actually go down, you might actually think, oh, actually perhaps you can also invest in an upgrade of this initial plant to also cover my electric peak load. And the second follow-up investment that we'll consider is, well, perhaps you can actually also use the heat that this plant is going to produce. So in this plant we're going to burn some gas that's going to produce our electricity, but it's also going to some heat, and perhaps you can actually use that heat as well in our paper mill or in our steel factory. So we might have the option here to extend this initial plant with a heat exchanger, which is basically the instrument, basically the machinery that's used to actually extract this heat, and to use that to basically to heat up some water, which you can then use in your production process. So that's the paper that we'll do today, Siddiqui and Marabou. What we'll do in the second lecture of this week is look at a older but very classic paper, actually, by Pindick. So what Pindick did was look at the option to keep on expanding. So it's not just one addition that you make, but demand might keep growing and growing and growing, and you will follow up by keeping on expanding capacity of your plant. So we'll also have a look at what can we do if there's no natural endpoint here, so we can keep on expanding for the foreseeable future our total capacity of, say, the network that we are building. So that will be the topic of the next lecture. But first, let's have a look at this paper today. This paper by Siddiqui and Marabou, which you can find in your reading